Hello, boys and girls. This is the other Paul, and welcome to what is probably the first stream in a decent. Okay, no, that was the Charlie Kirk thing. That was not too long ago. But in terms of stream content, no audio. Yeah, right. If there is can you hear me? Can you all hear me? I'm trying to articulate my mouth to make sure. Testing. Yeah, because my mic says, yeah, that's just Zach being in trouble. Zach, you dog. Zach, you dog. How dare you kill my flow like that? How flipping dare you? I'm trying to be a lot more articulate in my streams, a lot more precise and deliberate with my words, slower to speak, so that I sound better. Literally, ignore that my volume was turned down too low. For real though, I've actually very consciously been trying to emulate in terms of diction none other than the great Nicholas J. Fuentes. He is actually one of the best orators in live political commentary out there, period. I think that's a massive factor behind his success. And I've deliberately tried to look into it, see how he says things, and I've noticed the key elements of how he speaks and why it sounds so good. So I'm trying to emulate that among following the rhetorical ability of other historical leaders from a certain couple of decades in the early 20th century. Putting that to the side, though, this is probably the first bit of action. Oh, you naughty dog. Good to see you, by the way, Wayne. But this is probably the first bit of actual stream content on my channel, on the YouTube at least, for a decent amount of time. That has to change, but again, as normal, I can't promise things because, or I can't promise that kind of thing in terms of irregular schedules because of just how my brain is not exactly wired that way, although I am changing it, God willing, for the better. And I'm hoping this stream won't just be a lot of boring rambling. I hope it'll actually be cool, fun, and entertaining. Because other than a bunch of links to certain articles to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about, I didn't put down any specific notes. And so this is largely going to be off the cuff. It's largely going to be improv. But as such, it will also be from the heart, and that was more or less always the intention of this stream. Obviously, it was intended to happen much, much sooner, right, much, much closer to the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, and basically in response to that, or rather, in response to a certain faction's response to that, unfortunately. So unfortunately, this stream will probably lose a bit of its effect, if you will, but hopefully it'll still be something. I guess you don't have your expectations put up too high. Consider it more or less a rant session. That's basically what it is, because that's what I destined for it from the start when I first scheduled this stream. It wasn't going to be some scholastic treatise against the Big Eva school of thought. But, it's just stuff to get off my chest because I've said it to friends in private and things like that. I've publicly attacked what's called Big Eva as well. But in terms of just giving the full-on why I hate it and why it needs to change, I don't think I've done that before. So wouldn't that be nice? Excuse me, a bit of stuff in my nose. I'll say hello to people. Biff Gunderson, hello, brother. Hope you're well. Thank you, mate. Hope you are too. Benjamin Zaboy, very good to see you. Good to see you, Wayne, legendary supporter. Evren, hello. Zach, we saw you, you naughty, naughty boy. Reformed Catholic, hello, good to see you. For real, Nick Fuentes, hey, whatever you think of his beliefs, in terms of his rhetorical ability, he is absolutely top-notch. Big Eva and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. So true. By the way, in case this guy's watching, there's someone who sent a super chat in the live chat around the time when this was supposed to go live, but I forgot to actually reschedule it as I was meant to. And I was going to bring up that super chat first thing. It was like a 20 Australian dollar or 20 US dollar super chat. Big one. Much appreciated. I was going to bring that up and read the question, but unfortunately it disappeared before the stream. So I think that guy has like Reformation or Protestantism or something in his name. Pretty sure it's Reformation. He'll know who he is. And I'll be able to recognize your name. Because it's one of those things where, like you can't recall something immediately, but if you see it again, you'll recognize it. One of those things. If I see that guy, if that guy's here, if he sends his chat through and I see his name, I'll recognize it and I'll treat it like a $20 super chat because he did give me a $20 super chat, which I'm very much appreciative of. So to commence this more or less impromptu stream, I'll first establish some terms a little bit. Just what is meant by Big Eva. Of course, it's a common term, but I think it has a pretty clear sense, especially in the United States, from which it has originated. And it denotes the informal, sometimes formal, but largely informal complex of mainstream, respectable, public evangelical institutions, whether they be specific churches, specific pastors, parachurch ministries, corporations, so on and so forth. And my first and only moderator is here, Wilhelmius van Dijper. Very good to see you, mate. Very good to see you. So that is a definition I literally just came up with then, because I'm just that good at making definitions. And I think it's more or less sensible. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. But essentially that complex of evangelical institutions who are in that informal relationship with each other and in particular try to push at least a veneer of theologically and socially conservative Christian faith, while yet under the surface, or in more recent times, much more explicitly, pushing key tenets of liberal, subversive, in some cases, Marxist thought. So by way of concrete example, which concrete examples should always be provided when one is giving definitions of a thing, a concrete example of this would be the Gospel Coalition. They are probably the embodiment of Big Eva sine qua non. If TGC wasn't Big Eva, then no one is, basically. They will, on the one hand, publish articles and reviews of books in favor of traditional Christian ideas like complementarianism, like the deity of Christ, like creation ex nihilo? I don't know. Against homosexuality, matters like that. And they will do all that, but then at the same time, they will then move to endorse key elements of the current liberal zeitgeist. They will, for example, promote the narrative of George Floyd as a big din-do-nothing who was killed by evil whitey. That's something they did, and I actually have I decided to bring up the links for that just to showcase that in contrast to their reaction to Charlie Kirk and his assassination. And I'll look at this quickly. Is Big Eva a North American phenomenon or a global/Anglosphere phenomenon? I think it's pretty global, although centered in the United States. That tends to be where the center of power is for Big Eva. But it's definitely global. We have it here in Australia. We most certainly do. Perhaps not to the same intensity, though. So they will push conservative theology, conservative social thought on the one hand, and liberalized or Marxist thought on the other. And typically, it just so happens, I don't think coincidentally, that those areas in which they're more liberalized or Marxist friendly happen to be some of the most fundamental pressing areas for us and for our society today. So again, for example, the George Floyd thing, the idea that big boy didn't do nothing, just just, I don't know, frolicking in the street, I guess, until that evil whitey Derek Chauvin came in and just pressed his knee on his neck for absolutely no reason at all. And that this is a case of the systemic injustice in the United States against blacks, against racial minorities, etc. That happens to be one of the pressing narratives of the time, one which has been utterly rubbished throughout the years now, as statistics have been released, and as, ironically enough, as Black Lives Matter got their way and had police officers required to wear body cams turned on during altercations. And it just backfired spectacularly. We see the behavior of violent American blacks in front of police now on video. And so now their grievance narratives have more or less disappeared, as far as I've seen. I don't know if anyone's noticed. Maybe it's just, I don't know if it's my feed. I mean, no, it wouldn't be my feed thing, because these things used to make frontline news all the time. But I think we all remember that period. And it's really a long period when you think about it, at least as old as Rodney King back in the 90s. Or was that the 80s? I'm pretty sure that was the 90s. I'm not sure. But anyway, where it was, black man walking on the street, cop says, hey, N-word, and then just shoots him. That's basically the story. Every single someone gonna clip that. I bet that wasn't even intentional for a clip. That's just how it's always portrayed. And then that cop proceeds to kill that black man for absolutely no reason. And those are the narratives coming out all the time, but especially peaked with your boy Michael Brown in 2014, when he, again, similar situation to Floyd, but he was basically killed in self-defense by a cop. And unfortunately, that became the impetus for what we now know as the Black Lives Matter movement. So it is literally based on a lie. That much is factual. But those narratives kept coming out. Actually, was Trayvon Martin before Michael Brown? I think it was. I'm not sure. But either way, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, numerous other stories of didn't do nothing's poor black men. And that became the norm. But I'm pretty sure since Black Lives Matter got their way and American police are now required to wear their body cams everywhere, basically, same with Australia, actually, now we're actually seeing the true nature of those altercations HD, live on video. We see now that, as the King's Hall guys, Brian Sauvé rightly said, American blacks as a people have a massive problem. They are, quite simply, as a collective people, not civilized. It's that simple. They are a liability. That's how that is. But unfortunately, what do Big Eva groups like the Gospel Coalition do? Do they do the Christian duty of acknowledging the problem as it is and then trying to find Christian pastoral solutions to those problems, insofar as those problems are pastoral in nature and spiritual? No, they play into the grievance narratives. They side with my victims, the minorities, the oppressed party in the oppressor-oppressed dialectic, and they side with that. And they push that narrative, one which has served in the United States since its Civil Rights Act, essentially as the casus belli for the disenfranchisement of white Americans and the destruction of their cities, their neighborhoods, the murder of their boys, I don't care about the algorithm, the rape of their girls. Those false claims, those whiny little bitch fests of oppression, are what have been used to justify the ethnic, the demographic destruction of the United States and other nations outside the United States, but the United States is of a particular focus here. That's what it's been used for. I remember reading in at least one of those documents. Actually, there's a particular book. If people look up Academic Agent and they find his bombshell video that basically exposed the the CRS organization, the one that was just defunded by the Trump organization, which is fantastic. I forgot what the acronym stands for, but it was basically the organization where when a black guy kills a white person, they're the ones who, on behalf of the Department of Justice, they would go in, tell the white family, hey, don't make this about race, don't make this about grievances, just talk forgiveness, don't see race. So basically, hey, whitey, shut up while you're killed. That was basically what that organization did. An academic agent got a book by, I think, a founder of that organization who just openly talked about what they do. And the phrase that was used in that book was basically, we need to break up lily white towns. That was their purpose. That was their purpose all along. At least one of their purposes. There we go, that's it. The FBI's Community Relations Service, that's what it was called. And the Trump administration just completely defunded it. It's being shut down, which is beautiful and fantastic. But in any case, to keep it on track, that narrative, that subversive narrative that has seen the utter destruction the ongoing destruction, it's not complete, and it can be reversed, miracles are possible, but the ongoing destruction of the United States as a civilization, as an empire, was in part done with that narrative. Whitey bad, you need to accept blackie into your neighborhood, you need to let them all in, and you need to treat them with kitty gloves while they go out spurging out, shooting up things. If your own people did those same things, they need to face the full hammer of the law. They need to be locked up, or in some cases, death penalty. Oh, but if my poor big black man does it, we need to understand this is from the systemic injustice that they endured as more slaves. There's some magic slave blood that just makes them violent for some reason. And if you just treat them nicely enough for a long time and you give them enough gimmies, enough gibs, gib, oh, they'll be fine eventually. When? No idea, but it will happen. It'll happen. That is one of and to circle it back, and I'm impressed that I was able to circle it back after this amount of time, because most people will probably get lost at this point. But to circle it back, that is one of the key narratives that Big Eva, not just the Gospel Coalition, they're just an example, but Big Eva, that they have forwarded, that they have pressed, that they have sought to teach and disseminate among those under their influence, under their care. And what else do you make of that? It's an evil, it's a destructive narrative, and Big Eva is all for it. More intensely a little while ago, now that public backlash against those things, against those narratives, and white Anglo racial consciousness is actually on the rise in the mainstream once again, those narratives are being challenged again. And so Big Eva, I'll just be straight up, like the pussies they are, they're not as loud. They're not as loud on those things anymore. Some of them are still saying it, including at least one absolute dog of an actor I'll gladly point to soon. But they're fundamentally pussies, a lot of them. That's what they are. And so as the popular backlash of these things grows, they're going to they're going to pull back a little. But if and when they do get the opportunity to act subversively, to destroy actual right-wing movements, they do that. They'll 100% do that, but that's beyond the scope of this stream. And that is the core, really, of my invective against Big Eva, of this rant stream. And I don't want this stream to be just a rant and then, okay, thanks, bye. I want it to be useful. I always want all my streams to be useful. And so if they're educational, there'll be a lot of educational content, sources, Q&As, what have you. This one's not quite that. Again, it's more of a rant. But I have thought a long time about how many of us make this political content. We'll make political commentary. We'll give good, well-evidenced thoughts, well-articulated thoughts on these current issues. And then it's just, okay, guys, thanks for watching. Tune into the next show, and I'll use my promo code for my... oh, that's inappropriate. Use my promo code for my testosterone supplement or whatever, stuff like that. But what I don't see from so many of these political commentators is actual calls to action. These guys saying, okay, having watched this, having agreed with what I said, what should you do now? That's what I'll do, at least by the end of this stream. so that it's not just a glorified therapy session on my part. Because I've thought genuinely a lot about what people can and should do. I've thought about it myself, and I'm doing things right now, some things which I won't say publicly. Not that there's legal issues, but just that's good OPSEC. You don't want bad actors to know. But I will give an outline of what people should do who are listening, what they can do even just right after the stream, just so that it's somewhat useful. But all that being said, that is the core of my invective against Big Eva, of like the essence of why it is fundamentally corrupt and why it needs to be torn down and rebuilt, because it's good and necessary to have a mainstream Christian intelligentsia, as Big Eva is. That is good and necessary, because an intelligentsia by nature is that which, at least when it's functioning properly, guides the consciousness of the masses. It educates them and informs them. And so for us Christians, it's utterly incumbent on us that we ensure a proper Christian intelligentsia is established. Big Eva as it is now is not that. So it needs to be destroyed. And I'll perhaps go through just some examples now, right after I do some more of my protein. By the way, as usual, I will take questions at the end, so much appreciated if you want to send those through. Now, do I want to look at this one? Yeah, I'll look at this one first. Okay, so I'll pull up my Twitter here just for the first example. Make sure there's no compromising personal information. No, there is not. That is good. Okay, so great post by Megan Basham here, and this is on, Australia time, September 13th. So this is right after the Kirk assassination, all right? Hang on, I'll change something up. There might be some private info there. There we go. All right, all good. Just making sure. Anyway, Megan Basham, great, sensible comment. Basically what I'm saying today, what I will be saying more today concerning Big Eva, right after the Charlie Kirk assassination. That being, do you know why we've seen the Gospel Coalition, Christianity Today, and other evangelical leaders trying to suggest Charlie Kirk's death is the result of a generic political problem and not concentrated on one side? Because they have coddled and accommodated that side for years, trying to pretend that their positions on climate change or gun control or Marxist anti-racism, what we were just talking about, were the moral equivalents of trying to rescue babies in the womb and children from trans surgeons. So now they are in a position that they cannot speak the truth about what happened Wednesday, because they would be indicting much of the very audience they've worked so hard to attract. And this is true. This is absolutely true. This was especially provoked by, I think, the Gospel Coalition's first article on Charlie Kirk, on the assassination. And it is a broad pattern. This is just a very broad pattern they see. I remember seeing it specifically in another herald of Big Eva, Russell Moore, where when you have spates of right-wing, quote-unquote, or racist violence or this, that, and the other, he'll gladly point out, oh, this was racism. Oh, this was extreme far right-wingism. Oh, this was anti-Semitism, blah, blah, blah. But when the equivalent happens from the other way around, he would go on and say, oh, political violence is so bad. Oh, we need to bring back gun control, blah, blah, blah. I'm pretty sure we all saw that with which one was it? Because we know the recent tranny shooter that happened, the recent tranny shooting at that Catholic school. But there was the one before that. Was that a Catholic school as well, or just a generic private Christian school. I think people know it was with the trainee who went by the name Audrey Hale, I believe. I think that one. I remember with that one very clearly when that happened, the Big Eva bastards, including like Brent Leatherwood, what's he head of again? Is it of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission? Is that what he's a head of? I think so, in the Southern Baptist Convention. So he came out and other figures came out and they straight up opposed the public release of that trainees manifesto. What gives? Why is that? Further, with that trainee shooting and with the recent one at the Catholic Church, the leftist, the progressive framing of it was, oh, this is why we need gun control. This is what all the normies were saying. The hyper generic ones. This is why we need gun control. We don't need trainee control. No. We need gun control. That's what we need. That's the frame they played, and that's exactly what the Gospel Coalition does. That's exactly what Big Eva does on the regular. And just to show you another example of that right here, a certain Mike Cosper, I believe an editor at Christianity Today, if I'm not mistaken, his profile will say it, he decided to quote tweet Megan Basham's very true statement and say this. Christianity Today, of course he is. Yes, only one side indulges political violence. A very obviously sarcastic statement, followed by a GIF, I believe from January 6th, I think. So, a beautiful attempt of equivocation. Charlie Kirk assassinated. Multiple Christian centers, schools and churches shot up by leftists. Regular violence by the broad movement and many groups that come under the movement of Antifa. And not to say anything about leftist encouraged and bankrolled black violence, including through the organization Black Lives Matter until relatively recently, where cities were essentially burned down by their activism for the sake of quasi-Marxist grievance narratives. All of that is equivalent to one protest that went out of hand, but even not that much because security on site let people into the White House, and which we have just learned was embedded with over 200 federal agent persons. I won't say agents. I don't think that's technically accurate because it can also include informants, but people who were there on behalf of federal intelligence. Over 200 in that crowd. That's the moral equivalent. Oh, let's say nothing of abortion. Because abortion itself, that is leftist violence. That is leftist mass genocide. Anyone who wants an abortion, they'll get it. But particularly aimed at whites. Particularly aimed at white peoples. And wanting to see them kill off their own kin so that their numbers can drop. And it's worked quite beautifully up to this point. All of that but the right did January 6th. That's why I said this comment. I didn't even try to hide it because I do want to actually read it. And I mean every word of it. If Mike or anyone else who's friends with him is listening. I should have said at the start of the stream, this is not going to be kid-friendly, the language. So I'm sorry if you learned that the hard way, but I'm going to make that clear now. And I quote, "You are impressively sentient for a pile of shit. You know one side is orders of magnitude more violent, even when including the extreme segments of both left and right. You know this, yet you systematically lie by omission. Go prostrate at Martin Luther King Jr.'s statue. We know you want to." And I mean every word of that. Every single word of that. Sorry, just got mad itch here. Because that's what dogs like Mike are. They hold, as I mentioned, the external trappings of conservative theology and conservative social thought in order to maintain that audience, in order to maintain that social standing among the biggest supporter base. But when the opportunity comes, they'll happily push narratives of subversion, against Christ's lordship over the state, against the ethnic interests of whites, against just good nuclear families who want to be left alone and not have to live around problem populations who are prone to violence. Every opportunity that dogs like Mike take, they will counter-signal that, and they'll even actively work against it. This is the embodiment of Big Eva. This is their modus operandi. This is their nature. And I am thus convinced that nothing short of their complete and utter reputational destruction, even financial destruction, to the point where not only do they no longer have editorial positions at magazines like Christianity Today, not only that they can't even get basic office work, but not even that they can get basic retail or warehouse work. It is good, just, and necessary that these dogs are forced to beg on the streets for scraps because of the damage they do, because of how much destruction and evil they have perpetrated, not just in the minds of pliable Christians under their sway, but as a result, because of the scale of that effect, the perpetuation of the evils and injustices that plague the world today, the Western world. Those injustices which create, what's his name again? The track runner kid who was killed by that black guy, that black classmate. What's his name again? Someone remind me in the chat. But that guy, I think we all know who I'm talking about. And Irina Zarutska, or Zarutsky, however you say it. They create that. They create new Charlie Kirks. They create millions upon millions of not just Americans, but whites across the Anglosphere who suffer because of the forced integration and forced toleration of races that did not and could not build their own civilizations. They were given grace in various forms, being allowed to live in those areas, uplifted through education, among other means. And for a number of them, that's worked out. That's it. Thank you. Austin Metcalf. Thank you, Johannes. Yes. Johannes Adolf Schnitzelmacher. I love that. But anyway, yes. They create the efforts, the beliefs, the propaganda of Mike Cosper, of those at the Gospel Coalition, among many others. They create Austin Metcalfs. They create Irina Zarutska. They create Charlie Kirks. And they create, as I was saying, the millions and millions of whites who have to endure the presence and violence of races who simply cannot handle civilization. And again, as I was also in the middle of saying, they're in the process of being uplifted. And guess what? A number of men, because in the end, even though collectives are real, collective spirits, collective behaviors are real, individuals are also real as well. So you can find, even in the worst of races, you can find individuals who are upstanding, who got the memo, who are genuinely educated, genuinely civilized. You can find those guys. I'm proud to, and the fact that I'm doing that, I don't even want to do that, because that's always been the utter bullshit of having these conversations, where if you want to talk honestly about how this or that race, as long as they're not, I mean, if they're white, have at it. You can call them the scum of the earth and without any qualification. But if you want to talk about genuine, honest, provable failings of other races, minimally, you have to also say, oh, hashtag not all, hashtag not every individual. Even though that should just go without saying, unless the guy's explicit. It should just go without saying. I shouldn't have to say that. In fact, I don't have to say that. But I don't know. I'm still trying to work off that internal compulsion drilled into whites where they have to proverbially kiss the feet of minorities and say, oh, but there's good ones too. Oh. So I guess I'm still working that off. And in that light, I'm saying that, yes, there are many, numerically speaking, genuinely civilized blacks and Indians, among other races. I know a bunch of them, and I gladly call them friend. That doesn't change the fact of collective reality. Collectively speaking, Indians and blacks in America are just terrible races. That's just what they are. I'm going to be straight up with that. How can I not be honest about that? Reading not just crime statistics, but even things like rates of abortion, things like divorce rates, various other social realities. Those are biblical categories to talk about. It is biblical to speak of this race as bad in this way, this race is bad in that way, and thus you're able to say, relatively speaking, this one is better than this one. Is it necessarily on the grounds of biology? No, not necessarily. That's where the distinction between the principle which and the principle by which needs to come in. The principle which does things, is a race. The principle by which is the means by which a race exists or by which it acts. So, for example, you could say accurately that, let's just do euphemisms. You could say, oh, the Martian race is extremely violent and evil. Now, when you say that, people automatically assume you're thinking, oh, it's because of their biology and genetics, and that's bad and racist because blah, 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 I made it up. When no, that's not necessarily the case. It could entirely just be because of Martian culture. And as such, it could be changed. Martian culture could be changed, and the Martian race could therefore be made better. The Martian race is the principle. Martian culture is the principle by which. And so I'm not even wandering into the territory of, oh, our problems with blacks in America and elsewhere and with Indians, is it biological, is it genetic and all that stuff, or is it just cultural? I'm not even wading into that because the result is the same. It actually does not matter because cultures and free-floating abstracts don't do things. It is peoples with that culture that do things. And so even if it's entirely a cultural phenomena, nothing to do with their biology, which personally I think is scientifically a load of bullshit, but that's for another stream. Even if it's all just culture, you can still say, okay, and that culture is the culture of this race. Therefore, you can say that this race has this quality. It's not that hard. Not that hard at all. White is a color, not a race. Well, no, not true. White is a, what's the term? It's a metonym. It is a metonym for Europeans. So, yeah, I with respect, mate, I like you, but I really don't like when people are really obtuse about that. I think anybody who's been in the discussion for more than 5 minutes knows what people mean when they say white. Nobody just means, oh, well, it's the mere skin color. Otherwise, you'd find even the most cartoonish KKK guys, Nazis and all that, looking at albino Africans and saying, hey, brother, how's the white race? But that doesn't happen because it's not about mere color. It's not. It's not. Okay, Philip, if you're going to be obtuse, I'm going to be obtuse back to you. No, European is not a person. European is an adjective which is applied to nouns. So if you're going to be obtuse, I'm going to be obtuse back to you. There is a European race. You can absolutely speak about that. And then there are likewise races within the European race. Frenchmen, Germans, Englishmen, so on and so forth. Anyway, so this is getting a bit beyond off track anyway. Well, Paul's 2018 alt-right posting. I'm just fact posting. I'm just fact posting at this time. This is a very good point. Culture is eugenic. A culture will breed the type of people who do well in it. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Anyway, bringing it back here, bringing it back full circle, those kinds of lies that allow terrible people and terrible groups to keep being terrible and to oppress and bring great suffering upon the innocent, COSPA and Big Eva, people like that, that's their modus operandi. Enable them. Let them keep doing that. Out of what vision is it? Are they legitimately just that evil that they are lying about their motives and they just want to see destruction? Likely not. I don't think so. To be absolutely charitable, COSPA and others believe in the utterly delusional liberal worldview of racial egalitarianism, to an even stronger point than many racial egalitarians, where you can't even say black culture is bad. That was the reaction to Brian Sauvé's statement on the King's Hall. He didn't even say blacks as a race. He explicitly said black culture. And even that got a whole lot of panties in a twist. That was insane. That was actually insane. And so for these problems to go away, part of the solution is that Big Eva figures like this, they have to go away. They have to go away. With that said, I'll demonstrate the key thing that Basham is talking about here with regards to how Big Eva kisses left and punches right, where they'll say when an attack that's favorable for a left-wing cause happens in terms of its narrative, they'll say, oh, systemic injustice, oh, racism, this, and that. They'll bring out all the left talking points. They'll capitalize on that rightly. But when it happens the opposite way, when a black kills a white, when a conservative, when a tranny kills and actually with that, there's an exception in that one for the Gospel Coalition's credit. We'll probably explore that. Rather, when a liberal kills a conservative and stuff like that, they won't talk about the specific ideological issues like they do for leftists. No. They'll just say, oh, the problem of violence. Oh, the problem of guns. Just these hyper generic crap, which they know is crap. You can't not see the double standard. And I'm going to show some examples of that now. So first, no gooning 14, good message. But Paul, all cultures are equal. Rap music from O Block is just as beautiful and refined as Bucks. So true, King, so true. Ay. Oh, man, it's all so tiresome. So I'm going to pull up the first example. So we're going to compare the Gospel Coalition's reactions to George Floyd versus their reactions to Charlie Kirk. Okay? We're going to do that now. I don't know if I'll look at all of them, but I'll at least look at one of them. Especially this one. This one's pretty funny. Now, notice I'm using an archive link, and that's because when this crap happened, people rightly went absolute apeshit against the Gospel Coalition for their Floyd hagiographies. And so they had multiple articles. I wish I could give awards in this channel. Woo, okay, breathe. Okay, back on topic. And by the way, people do please give comments on if my diction has been pretty good, if I haven't been talking super fast and blending words and using shorthands and what have you. I think I've been pretty good. Yeah, I mean, maybe. But I decided to put this on YouTube anyway because YouTube has actually been becoming a lot more lax recently. Like, I've seen people making much more incendiary far-right claims on YouTube videos just fine. And they're even bigger channels. So, I don't know. I'll take the gamble. In any case, Gospel Coalition published numerous hagiographic articles on George Floyd and how, it's the racism and she and stuff like that. But a number of them were deleted eventually, I believe, just because of the backlash. So I went to the archive, the good old Wayback Machine, and decided to pull some of them up. And I have one of them right here. And I'm going to make sure, look, when you want to read an article, you have to make sure that, because it's not just about reading the words, but when people write just as they speak, they have a certain intonation in mind, because intonation can actually drastically affect meaning. The classic example given now, it's given by Romanists as an argument against the clarity of Scripture, which is retarded, but it does help in this regard. If you say, I never said you stole my wallet, versus I never said you stole my wallet. Notice the difference of intonation. They're actually communicating very different things in that regard. With the first one, you're denying that you said something, that you said someone stole your wallet, but you're not denying that they did. Whereas in the second one, you're denying that you said that person stole your wallet, but someone else did. Very, very different in terms of their implications. And so in that light, we have to read these articles. And this one in particular is by Amy DiMarcangelo. We have to read them with the proper intonation in mind. And so I've made sure to practice that. And so hopefully it works. I've just got to wet my tongue a bit. All right. Like relentless waves, the news keeps crashing. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, each one an image bearer of God, each one beautifully woven by their maker and bestowed with brown skin, each one senselessly killed. These three people, three deaths, three situations point to a larger issue with broad implications. It is godly to get angry. I'll say it again. It is godly to get angry. Shit. Okay. I can't keep doing that. My gosh, that is taxing. Absolutely taxing. But point being, when you actually scroll through the article, you notice what he's talking about. Well, for one, it's right for us to get angry. It's very right for us to get angry. But about what? As you scroll through, you see that he's speaking of a particular section in mind. Hang on. I'll do a quick word search. Here we go. Yep. God hates injustice. No, I'm not going to do that. God hates injustice. He hates racism and oppression and abuse and corruption. And so should we. Romans 12:9 says, let love be genuine, abhor what is evil. How interesting that the first instruction to demonstrate genuine love is to hate what is evil. It is ungodly to be apathetic. It is unloving to not be angry in the face of evil. Mere sympathy toward the oppressed isn't enough. If I found out that one of my children had been molested, I would be filled with intense grief and anger, and it would be a righteous response. If I wasn't angry, there'd be good reason to question the depth of my love. Likewise, if we see the news of brutality and don't feel angry, we should probably question the depth of ours. In other words, notice this. He's very clearly pulling from it's not enough to be against racism. It's not enough to not be racist. You must be actively anti-racist. That's quite literally what he's saying here. Mere sympathy toward the oppressed isn't enough, or it is ungodly to be apathetic. It is unloving to not be angry in the face of evil. Now, here's the thing. In principle, I actually agree with that. In principle, what he says is absolutely right. But get the irony of this. Scholastic Lutherans, good to see you guys. Good to see you. It's not enough to be racist. So true. No, you must be super racist. These guys get it. So true. So true. What are the odds? What are the odds that the really academic and scholastic types outside of the mainstream institutions are really racist. Just noticing patterns, guys. Just noticing patterns. With that said, notice a couple of things here. First, notice how he quite literally says what Joel Webbin said and what he was pilloried for by Big Eva. How interesting that the first instruction to demonstrate genuine love is to hate what is evil. That sound familiar to something similar? Basically what Joel Webbin said. I forgot exactly how he worded it, but basically that we need to learn to hate again. And he had a proper qualification of what he meant by that, more or less similar to this. But who gave him that charity? None of the normal guys. The Big Eva guys hated him for it. Ironically, they destroyed him. And yes, Scholastic Lutherans, they're still good boys. That was indeed a joke. I'll give them that charity. But was I joking? But they'll give this guy that charity, or this person. I don't know the sex. It's okay if you're making grievances for fake black racial oppression. You're allowed to say, oh, it's okay to hate in this way or that way. As soon as the white man or the Christian nationalist does it, how dare you? That's how it works with Big Eva. That's how it absolutely works. And I just wanted to show this article as just one example. I had for some reason, the links for the other ones did not show up, but there are others. If you simply look up, this is my evidence for you if you want to check for yourself, look up the Gospel Coalition, George Floyd, find all their articles. They have multiple articles. Only one of them is still up. But for the other ones, just put them into the Wayback Machine. You'll be able to read them. You'll be able to see this pattern of how these article authors, they're all about lamenting George Floyd. And not just that, but like, oh, racism bad, systemic injustice bad, and all that jazz. Basically pushing the very political issues they want to derive from this. Come Charlie Kirk, we get a little bit of a different tune. And in fact, Megan Basham appears quite vindicated. I guess I won't say vindicated because I think it was in response to this that Basham made her comments, but it's very evident. So the first one, I think, is this one. Where is King Jesus when violence reigns? Right after, I think maybe even day of Kirk's assassination. We need to do an early live check on the TGC. True that. Jean, lovely to see you, representing the Scholastic Baptists here. I concur. That's the way. Attaboy. We must end casual racism and enforce ranked racism. Look, not to brag, but as it happens, racism has the same leaderboard as Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And not to brag, but I'm global elite, so get on my level. So here's the TGC's article on the Kirk assassination right as it happened. Let's read through this. It's bad enough no gruesome tragedy goes unnoticed by social media, but now we have to see the video of these attacks almost in real time. This is no movie. The screams, the fear, the blood, it's real. I can't get the terrified look of Irina Zarutska out of my head, and it is genuinely haunting, so they're right there. It's from her last moments before death, stabbed August 22nd by a man. Just a man, nothing else relevant about it, just a man. So that's the first thing to notice, who should have already been locked away for public safety and his own health. Yep. Now we see the raw video of Charlie Kirk shot today, September 10th, at Utah Valley University. To these high-profile attacks, we could add school shootings and war in Europe and the Middle East to the drug trafficking and gang retributions that don't register enough ongoing concern because of their common occurrence, and all this approaching the anniversary of the September 11 terrorist attacks. Do you see this shit? Do you see this? Exactly what Basham talked about. When it's a shooting that propaganda-wise, and that's just me being cold and blunt about it, propaganda-wise is, and as we can definitely tell from hindsight, absolutely was a massive propaganda win for the right, because it demonstrated a problem that we've spoken of at length of leftist violence, that they want to kill, murder, destroy their opponents physically rather than debate and be persuaded. Charlie Kirk, the literal Ned fucking Flanders of conservative American politics, murdered live on air in the middle of a debate. Both literally and spiritually killing debate. And so rightly, the right says, hey, this proves our point. They want us dead. No matter how nice, no matter how charitable, no matter how cordial you are in debate, they want you dead. Therefore, the political left must be destroyed. Sinistra delenda est. But how's the Gospel Coalition look at it? They say, oh, Charlie Kirk was shot. Oh, but also the war in Europe. Oh, but the Middle East. Oh, but drug trafficking, which doesn't get as much attention as it should, by the way. Lumping it in as just part of a generic problem of violence. Yeah, violence in general, mass violence, is a global and terrible problem. Wow, TGC, no shit. I didn't know that before you wrote this. But why are you saying that here and not noting the specific implications and context of this shooting? To their credit, to their absolute credit, in a later article when more details were confirmed, they noted the problem of tranny ideology explicitly, which is great, which is good. That's absolutely very good. You can find that article yourself. I think it's in Is Charlie Kirk's Assassination a Turning Point? So look up that title, Is Charlie Kirk's Assassination a Turning Point? ? From the Gospel Coalition. They say that in there. Now, they say that because it's only gotten so loud and obvious that it's unavoidable. They could avoid it for Audrey Hale with that Christian school shooting. They can't avoid it here because now the voices against tranny ideology and just trannies simpliciter are so loud and unavoidable that now they feel a little bit of the buckling. Oh, I guess we should kind of talk about this issue. But beyond that, not really. Let's keep looking at this. Actually, let's look at the Turning Point article, because that one is especially more relevant. But again, this one is just exactly what Basham was saying, what many others are saying. When it's a leftist issue, they'll point to the specific alleged problems behind that. But when it's a right-wing issue, they'll just talk about, oh, this thing in general is bad, and we need to stop the bad thing. So now let's go to their article from days after. Oh, what the heck? Hello? Okay, that was weird. There we go. So it's not a long article. I think we can just read through it and we'll be able to critique it then. Within minutes of Charlie Kirk's assassination last week, the video clip was everywhere on social media. More graphic footage followed. Last year's Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt of President Trump unfolded the same way. Instant video all over the social media. Earlier this month, blah, 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 blah. Irina Zarutska being stabbed from behind in a monstrous act of murder now being investigated as a potential hate crime. Okay, I forgot about that. There you go. There you go. Well, I mean, if that is factually the case, then they can't not report that, so whatever. In December, video footage spread rapidly of a black-hooded Luigi Mangione, blah, 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 blah. It's easy to become numb, but images and video have galvanizing power. The real-time video chronicling of 9/11's horrors, nearly a quarter of a century ago, now powerfully shaped culture in my lifetime. So will the Charlie Kirk assassination. What kind of turning point? Let's see what they say about this. It's hard to not notice the name of the organization Kirk founded, Turning Point USA, mirrors the way Kirk's assassination feels. Will this event be a culture-shifting way in the way the 1960s political assassinations were? Is it a generation-shaping event like 9/11? I absolutely believe it is. Only time will tell, but I do sense that Kirk's assassination might be uniquely catalytic in American culture. It may not be a decisive turning point, but here are 3 ways this event might accelerate already in motion trends and why it matters for Christians. Okay. Yeah, okay, I remember reading this bit. Oh, my word. Yeah, okay, this is I remember this bit. So this is a perfect example. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I'll let you guys read it on the screen or in your own time. But again, notice the generalizing problems. 1, this is a new wake-up call about the dangers of digital life. Not specific digital spaces. Not digital spaces hosted and run for particular political, even terroristic organizations. No. It's just digital life. It's the Discord, Reddit, 4chan, TikTok. They're radicalizing. We're scrolling ourselves to death. Blah, 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 blah. Internet derangement syndrome. Oh, man. Advancing preferred narratives without anything specific. So notice this. It's just the digital stuff is bad. Oh, digital obsession in general is bad. Digital life in general is bad. Nothing about the particular chat rooms he was in. Nothing about the particular ideology that he was eventually groomed in, which I think details are still coming out about that, but it happened in a very short span, minimally. That's what we know. Nothing about that. Nothing about him, allegedly, I think at this point, frequenting the Discord of the American Communist Party, hence why they've scrubbed it. Nothing about those. Nothing about being just generally about being radicalized by particular views. No. It's the digital life that's a problem. Oh, it's just too much screen time. It made his eyes go square, and that made him shoot Charlie Kirk. That's the problem 101 right there. It's also tiresome, but we'll move on. I think I'll read this bit. Kirk was popular among Gen Z, perhaps the most popular political influencer among young Americans today, and he was Christian. Now, many faithful Christians will disagree, sometimes even deeply, about the way Kirk applied his faith with certain political and cultural positions. I certainly disagree with him at times, but can we pause and note the fact that perhaps the most popular political influencer of a generation was an outspoken Christian, and he wasn't a barstool conservative who shied away from social conservative and traditional conservatism and traditional morality. Blah, blah, blah. And here's where the good bit starts to come up. On issues like transgenderism, Kirk helped the rising generation see the reality-respecting dynamics of conservatism in contrast to the more aggressively reality-denying tendencies of progressivism. So he actually names it here. Yeah, same here. I disagree with Kirk because he wasn't conservative enough. Yeah, exactly. Kirk's packed events on college campuses, social media savvy, and contrarian mojo created plausibility structures for teenagers and 20-somethings to be conservative and faith-rooted in social issues in a world where for so long the narrative was young people are supposed to be secular and liberal. That's actually a very spot-on observation. That's actually very, very true. Young people today are dissatisfied with the status quo. Social media is killing them. Cancel culture terrifies them. Ideological conformity is stifling, blah, 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 blah. Again, the lack of specificity. That's where it freaking is. He just named it before. Why couldn't he be more specific here? It's not just social media simpliciter. It's not just cancel culture simpliciter, because unfortunately, as what many conservatives don't like to admit, but a lot more are now, cancel culture is a tool. We were just using cancel culture against people who celebrated Kirk's death. I mean, were they breaking the law? No. Were they breaking company policy? I mean, in some cases, yes, but in some cases, no. It was just enough pressure and get them out of their jobs. That's good and that's okay, but guess what? That's cancel culture. No other way to put it. So point being that and ideological conformity. Okay, to what ideology? Why not be more specific? Great, he gave some lip service to progressivism up earlier. Why not here? Why can't you specifically say what the problem is? Why do you feel the need to pussy out like this and just say, oh, it's this generic thing that's the problem? It's the generic thing. And it's baffling because he gets more specific soon. Literally right here, a whole section on trannyism. The full picture of Robinson's motive in killing Kirk is not yet known. Yeah, of course. But officials have repeatedly confirmed that the suspect had adopted leftist views, spoke of Charlie Kirk as being hateful, and was living with a transgender partner who was in the process of transitioning from male to female. Blah, 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 blah. Transgender ideology mocks God by rejecting his design. This worldview brazenly denies the gift of the bodies God gives. It's utterly disconnected from reality, something even many non-Christians see. Okay, that's a key thing I want you guys to hang on to. Something even many non-Christians see. We'll get back to that. And wreaks mental, physical, and spiritual havoc. Our trans neighbors are deeply deceived and need help, not the reckless affirmation they get from many leftist politicians. Kirk worked hard to expose all this. Sadly, it's possible Kirk may have died because of his outspoken courage on this issue. That's the way. Oh, and here's some more of the tripe again. I hope Christians carry the torch of Kirk's truth-telling about transgender ideology, motivated not by political gain so much as love for neighbor. Of course, again, a little bit more of that padding to get Christians to not be too worked up about this. Absolutely, so pathetic. Look, that said, he's bang on here. He's bang on. He could go a bit harder and a bit more specific, but hey, this is good. Why wasn't that the norm in the article? Where was that? Where is that in the other articles? Where is that across the rest of Big Eva? Why not more of this? And here's the thing. The trannyism is only one part of the issue. That's not the only one. It is the leftist progressive view in general. And the problem with that for TGC and others is that many in their own ranks adopt species of that overall family of ideologies. And so they have that pressure not to do that. Now, here's the important thing on why I suspect the author was particularly comfortable to specifically note out the tranny ideology specifically and not other things. It's what he says right here. Trannyism, is utterly disconnected from reality, something even many non-Christians see. Now, this is speculation on my part, but I think it's very well warranted speculation because we know how these Big Eva actors act. We know how they choose their beliefs. We know how they make their articles. It's not only kiss left and punch right, but it's also kiss atheist, punch Christian. That which is most, palatable to unbelievers of various stripes, including and especially leftist atheists, or just generally liberal, like normally liberal atheists. That's their target demographic. That's the one they want to draw in with their articles. And I suspect, no direct proof, but I strongly suspect, and I think this sentence is a bit of a Freudian slip in that direction, that this author is only noting the tranny aspect of this issue because he has seen, okay, a lot of the unbelievers are now against this too. Okay, it's safe. I can now talk about this matter. I think that is a very, very reasonable conclusion here. And in the middle of pointing out a good thing of this article, highlights the problems once again with Big Eva. That they tailor their evangelism, not merely, it's one thing, evangelism has to be tailored to some extent to the nature of the unbeliever. Hence what Paul says, to the Jew I became a Jew, to the Greek I became a Greek, so on and so forth. That's not the same thing as changing the substance of your message. You're changing the external trappings around it to be most receptive. You're not changing the substance. But I believe, well, for one, it's just a demonstrable fact. Big Eva, they changed the substance of their message in order to fit the culture. in order to be seen as, hey, we're not those like weird fundamentalist Christians. We're those cool Christians who are cool with the world. I strongly suspect that that sentence there reveals that for this author, he's only talking about the tranny aspect, and perhaps TGC's editors are only letting that in because now they see many unbelievers talking about it. That's my speculation. That is my speculation, but I think it's very reasonable. I'm going for. If anyone has questions, put them in with a Q, a colon, and then your question, so I can know it's a question. So I'm going to take this down now. I think we looked enough at that absolute trite, just as an example, because I'm relying a lot on people having the existing knowledge of just the nature of Big Eva, and I'm just kind of, this stream is just kind of me giving flesh to that, just putting ideas into words so that other people can use that for themselves. It could help them out. I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, that's basically my invective against Big Eva. They don't know the time, and I think in many cases they're genuinely evil, subversive actors, and they need to be destroyed. They need to be taken down. Bye-bye, scattered to the wind. And as I said earlier, some of those actors need to be forced to beg on the streets so that the church comes in, shows them grace, and they can restart their lives from a state of absolute humility. That's my genuine belief. Now, as I said earlier, I don't want this to just have been a pure rant stream. I want it to be something that's somewhat useful, something that's meaningful. So in that light, there's some calls to action. One of the first ones is kind of a meta call to action. If you watch this stream, you listen to it, and you just thought, wow, that was cool, entertaining stream, great thing, Paul, thank you very much, and you just moved on with your day, and that's it, then you actually wasted your time watching the stream. You actually did. And I should make that more explicit in all my streams. If you don't start thinking about what I can do in light of what I learned in this stream after you watch the stream, it is genuinely a waste of time. Outside of it being an educational stream. If you're just watching political commentary where they're saying the things that you already agree with, but you just like hearing it again from certain figures, which I do myself, there's nothing wrong with that itself. But if it doesn't inspire you to more action, then it's a waste of time. You've literally just wasted precious minutes and hours that God has given you on this earth that you'll never get back until eternity. And I think about that a lot. I think about that a lot with a lot of the time I've wasted over years, and I don't even want to think about that. But nonetheless, I'm still in my youth, relatively speaking, so I can salvage that. But it's with that concern in mind that I want to say to everyone watching, if you come out of this stream and you don't come to some kind of action, you don't think to yourself, okay, in light of what Paul has said here, things which I greatly agree with, it's a great problem, what can I do? You need to consider, what are your gifts? What are your talents? What resources are at your disposal? What networks do you have? What connections? All of those things within your power to some degree. What can I do with those in order to further this cause and to fight against this thing? What can I do now? At a minimum, if you're not already doing something, if you're already doing something against Big Eva and for true Christian social teaching, fantastic. You haven't wasted your time. This may have just served as further galvanization to keep doing what you're doing. But if you're not doing anything right now, if you're just living and working like a normal person, every single one of you needs to be doing something, no matter how small. And so that is the core call to action, really. Just do something. After this stream, just at minimum, just take a few minutes to sit and think, what can I do? And how can I achieve that? It's that simple. It really is that simple. Now, in terms of more specific calls to action on top of that, I kind of have to be a bit off the cuff because, again, I didn't really write notes for this. So, I hope this stream wasn't a drag, that it wasn't incoherent, because I had literally no notes except for the links. But I think compared to other streams that I've had in the past where that was the case, I think this one was pretty good. So, but yeah, give me your honest thoughts, people. But in terms of more direct calls to action, one thing you can do is be much more engaged with your ministers, with your pastors, especially if they're more or less Big Eva aligned. So if they're in that sphere and you know better, you know the errors of Big Eva thought, among other things, start talking with your pastor and saying, hey, I know you've said this, but I think it's wrong. Let's have a discussion about that. I think you're wrong. Here's why. Get those discussions happening, pushing for change. Excuse me, sorry. I need to pick up something in the shop soon, but I got up pretty early for this. But then also talk with your parishioners, talk with your fellow parishioners, and in particular, don't just talk to them about this like out of the wind. One of the greatest modes of persuasion is when you are friends with someone, and not only when you're friends with someone, but when you're friends to such a degree that they trust you and they respect you and they even defer to you. When that is the case, you get literally multiple orders of magnitude more persuasive power with that person than otherwise. Even if you use the exact same arguments, I know this for a fact from experience. And in that light, it does also mean that if you have that position with someone, you are way more responsible. Quite literally, as our Lord said, to him whom more has been given, more will be required. Even if you're not formally ordained to office, to a teaching office, to pastoral ministry, if you nonetheless have that practical influence over someone, you are functionally in that same position, and so you will be judged much more harshly if you lead them astray. And so really that's actually another sub-call to action, I guess. Read up on these matters that you are passionate about. Make sure you know what the hell you're talking about before you talk about it. And that's actually a key thing I point out in my coming book with Sacra Press. It will be coming out very shortly on the right to dissent. That's one of the key things I emphasize to people. When you're engaging in these intellectual debates, make sure you actually know what you're talking about before you talk about it. You need to be comprehensive with your study before you do all that stuff. I just read all day, Paul. Friggin' nerd, am I right? Get a load of this nerd. That way I'm always well read on every topic. Oh yeah? Well read on every topic, huh? Okay. Who was the 5th emperor of the Ming dynasty? Tell me that. You have 10 seconds. But anyway, so yeah, make sure you know what you're talking about, but then also talk with those people in your lives and persuade them if they're not already persuaded. Because ultimately how these things will change is when hearts and minds are changed themselves. Okay? That's how it all happens. It's not just... Yeah, not correct. That's not correct. The actual answer was the friends we made along the way. So clearly you don't read all day, buddy. Sorry. But yeah, talking with those people, changing their hearts and minds, and particularly becoming friends with them to the point where they defer to you, where they respect your opinion, that's one of the ultimate positions of being able to persuade others. And again, it does mean you become a lot more responsible. But in terms of fighting culture war, assuming you are actually correct in your beliefs, that is what you have to do. Just posting videos or blog posts or comments, that on its own does nothing. You've got to actually persuade people. Anyway, with that said, I don't see any questions. So I think this is good as it is for a stream. I've got the rant out. Yeah. Scholastic, can you tell me what was the cause of death of Steve's job? That's oh man. Oh, okay. We do have one question. Completely random one, sure. What is your position on saint invocation? I'm against the invocation of the saints. I believe we can only invoke God as the object of our prayers, as the recipient. Advocation is a different story. And the Scholastic Lutherans boys in the chat, they'll be much appreciative of that. Where advocation refers to how you're telling the saints to do something, chiefly to praise God. So like in the Psalms, where the author in one of them commands the sun and stars to worship God, among other things. We can do the same with the saints. One could say in their prayers, "O Blessed Virgin Mary, O great saints, the 12 apostles, blah, 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 praise and worship your king." You can do that just fine because the principled issue with saintly invocation is that it has an incorrect object of prayer, an incorrect desired recipient. Whereas with advocation, you're not praying to them, you're commanding them to render worship to God. Yeah, that's it. Ye watchers and ye holy ones. Can you say this? Skibidi ortho hang on, I need to get used to that. Palamesite. Palamesite. Okay, Palamesite. Skibidi ortho Palamesite Groiper Catechumen 42. There's your soundbite, buddy. You're welcome. That'll be 5 shekels. Thank you. With that said, if there's no more questions, I'm going to call it here. Thank you, everybody. This is a nice stream, nice and chill. I will say, just by way of announcements, the What is Anglicanism video, the big one that's been coming for a long time, that's coming soon, within 1 or 2 weeks, like actually, because it is going to be coming out before an event here in Sydney by the Prayer Book Society of New South Wales, which is discussing that very question. So that video is going to be coming out then. What else? Theocrat Lounge will be back next week. And the plan for that is to be reviewing a book by actually a local Sydney politician who's basically making an apologetic for the Indian takeover of Australia. That's a bit hyperbolic on my part, but that's functionally what he's doing. And I may have a pretty big guest, a big Australian content maker on for that one. So that's going to be pretty awesome. That'll be very fun. Ultimately, just keep me in prayers to be more consistent with content, be more active with it, so I can justify support and thus making it a job. So, there is one more question from the legendary supporter, DM Wayne. Do you think Anglicans should start giving non-Catholic titles for saints? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Do you mean like don't call them saint or doctor of the church? If that's what you mean, then I'd just disagree. I think they're perfectly... I mean, okay, I myself don't use the title saint. Like and the reason is like it's a bit of a biblicist take, but in the end, it's not like an important issue. So I'm not really fussed either way. I tend not to use saint just because Scripture repeatedly just calls everybody the saints. And so just like as a little bit of a personal preference, I don't like the distinction how, St. Augustine is a saint, but not like John Doe. If he's justified in Christ, then yeah, he's a saint. Absolutely. So I'm not, and I know there's probably more rationale to it, but just in the end, it's not an important thing. So whatever. So I don't tend to use saint, but ones like venerable or doctor of the church, those are great titles. Those absolutely should be revived. I'm all for that. So if that was what you meant, like how we call historical saints, but we don't give the formal title to new saints like Tyndale, etc. So are you saying the opposite? Are you saying we should start calling them saints? Do you think Anglicans should start giving non-Catholic titles for saints? Formal title to new saints like Tyndale, etc. If by that you mean the opposite of what I thought. Okay, yeah. So if you actually meant, should we apply saint titles to modern one? Yeah, absolutely. I believe that. I mean, if you like to use the title saint, then I think that'd be great propagandistically to apply that to modern guys. Like Joe, young Anglican, he actually started that not too long ago. He's actually kind of spearheaded it. He doesn't call Richard Hooker. He calls him Saint Richard Hooker or Saint Thomas Cranmer, which is base. That's awesome. Now, again, I don't use the title saint myself, but I'll happily call them things like venerable or doctor of the church. Those are great titles. Those should be used. So I guess in a way, the answer is yes. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a great stream. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications, become a supporter of the link below. Terribly sorry for breaking my promise of there being another Commonplaces article for priest tier and above supporters. That's coming up today. Right after the stream, quite literally. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a lovely day or evening. God bless.